right. So we can get going. It takes the spot is 30 seconds, but you won't be able to hear it. And then once I go, I'll play the song, go out, and then I'll introduce you, and we'll just get right into it. All right?
Sounds good. Yeah.
Yep. Here we go.
Spirits of French Lick is proud to introduce the Matty Gladden Bottled and Bond Bourbon. This 4-year aged bourbon is double pot distilled and non-chill filtered and has a full-bodied mouthfeel with eucalyptus, molasses, clove, ginger, and slight citrus as well as grains of paradise. The finish is long and reappearing on the back of the tongue with notes of pepper, tobacco leaf, and mint green. All of our spirits are available for tasting and purchase inside the French Lick Winery and Distillery. Spirits of French Lick. Respect the grain, please enjoy responsibly, and be sure to follow us on Facebook and Instagram.
Wash your way away to the next whiskey bar. Oh, don't ask why. Oh, don't ask why. Show me the way to the next whiskey bar. Oh, don't ask why. Oh, don't ask why. For if we don't find that whiskey bar, tell you we must die. Tell you we must die. Tell ya, I tell ya, I tell ya we must die.
All right. Welcome to another podcast of the Scotchy Bourbon Boys with a very special guest from Cask Chasers, Aaron Pross. Welcome, Aaron.
Hey, thanks, Jeff. Thanks for having me here.
Tonight, we are going to do something very different from what we normally do on the podcast. We are going to have kind of a duel.
I'm excited.
Yeah, me too. Aaron and I have been going back and forth on my opinion of Kirkland bourbon. And it's the small batch that Costco has just released. Now, they're going to be also release I believe a single barrel and then barrel proof coming up also. And I think I heard that the single barrel just recently has been going to some of the different places, but the barrel proof, I don't think there's been a sighting yet of that.
I haven't seen either of them.
Yeah,
like physically in person. I've heard legends though.
Now, my opinion was initially on the podcast. It's not that I think the bourbon in the bottle is for sure bad. I'm not saying that at all. I've never said that, but I am a firm, what would you say, whiskey fanboy. That's the only way you can put it. I'm a fanboy of whiskey, and whiskey is a complete and total experience for me. You know, especially I know on your podcasts, you guys do, cover a lot of Scotch. There's and a lot more than we do for sure. But at the same time, when you're talking Scotch, it's the full whiskey deal for the most part. Now, there are American single malts starting to come out, which kind of get into, can they compete from a marketing almost 1,000-year, market that Scotch has cornered, and can the single malts compete? And yes, I think they can. But what I'm trying to say is, I just love every aspect of whiskey. I like the marketing, the packaging. I don't mind paying for a really good whiskey that has marketing and packaging. I want the whole deal. And that's where I was coming from on the Kirkland. But at the same time, I was getting roasted because I wanted the whole deal. It was somehow I thought that I was attacking this brand.
And I think that's what a lot of people were seeing also. Like, I mean, your opinion and my opinion are going to vary greatly on this. And I mean, a lot of subjects just sort of from our, the pros and cons to everything, right? So I mean, what are some of the pros to having something like this? What are some of the cons? And I mean, I think I read something from you. You like to sit back on your porch, sipping a whiskey and thinking about the 1,000-year heritage of whatever this distillery is, or old great grandpappy when he had his single still and he was distilling it away. And there's something to be said for that. Absolutely. I'm not saying that that's not a valid thing, but I'm at the same time I'm also saying to me it's such a small part of why whiskey is important to me, that it's and just with the way the world is going, and you're seeing a whole bunch of new brands pop up now, that's exciting to me to be seeing that. And I like I said, although our opinions on maybe the specific things of this are going to differ greatly, at the end of the day, I think we can both agree we're kind of in a golden age of whiskey right now, and it's a fantastic time to be a whiskey fan.
And I agree. The one aspect is on that comment was the part that I'm not in it for, and this is where we're going to agree to disagree eventually in the end, but I'm not in it to think I got a deal at Costco. It just takes so much out of what I'm doing. And then the whole aspect of the Costco, the marketing of Costco from the standpoint of bacon, or you're talking about something, some of that, their brand, okay? I understand that. You strip away the advertising, and the same place, their hot dogs are being made at the same place the Oscar Mayer hot dogs are being made. Same thing, just they got their name on it and whatnot. But in this case, like I said, there's something, nobody really gives a shit. The fact that they're not looking for this high quality kind of thing from their bacon. You buy Kirkland bacon or you buy Kirkland ketchup, you're expecting a product, but this product isn't somehow there's an aspect of it, of the aging and the quality that goes into it. The same amount of quality goes into bacon, but you're not looking for the best bacon maker in the world. And nobody is with their bacon. You do go to some places that are but it's so rare for something like that. And I understand macaroni and cheese. I mean, I love Kraft macaroni and cheese. So if the Kirkland's using, that's fine. But that's not like, when I'm at the end of the day, I'm not eating Kraft macaroni and cheese saying, oh, this is the best macaroni and cheese. But when I'm drinking bourbon or I'm drinking scotch, there are times where it's like, wow, these guys did a really good job, and this bottle only cost, and then the whole aspect of them buying into it, So there's the first round. So,
my thinking is, so there are a couple different layers to it, and to be candid, I think I haven't tasted it yet ever in my life.
Either.
Right now neither of us have even tasted it. We're just arguing on principle at the moment.
Yes.
So to me, what I think back to when I first started drinking whiskey and really paying attention to whiskey. Okay. I was in my mid-20s. I would order whatever cocktail at the bar, and just whatever it was, a sea breeze, a bay breeze, a Long Island iced tea.
You're dating yourself, that's for sure.
Right, exactly. Yeah, right. I would drink that, and then I would get delivered the next one. I would drink that, and before I knew it, I had 5-6 really heavy duty cocktails, and I'm hammered without even knowing it. Right.
Right.
Whiskey really made me slow down, and when you don't know anything about it, you go, I'll have a scotch, give me a bourbon, if you've never done it or whatever. And I wish that I knew what whiskey these servers had brought me that actually made me slow down and actually made me, oh wow, I kind of taste something different in this, and I really am getting something on the nose, whatever. But I was so early along that I didn't really know, oh, there's vast differences between this bourbon, this bourbon, this bourbon, this bourbon. It's not just all bourbon, it's not just all Scotch, it's not just all whatever. So to me, I call those gateway whiskeys, right? The whiskeys that you kind of start off with. They're not terribly expensive. Maybe you buy it because it's the least expensive thing on the shelf, right? And so to me, this is first of all, I want to talk about that it comes in a liter, which you don't see.
Which was $18.99, which
right.
then even blows an aspect of it away that $18.99 for a liter. I mean,
right. So it's $18.99. Maybe you have somebody that buys this and they go, oh, this is cheap. I get more of it. Let me buy this. Okay. Maybe that person has never really gotten into whiskey before. Maybe they're like, oh, my friends are in some whiskey group. I know this guy. He's got a whiskey group on Facebook. I know this other guy. He has a whiskey podcast, Let me see what whiskey's about. So, $19. This other one over here is $35. I'll give it a try. Maybe he tries it. Maybe he hates it, but maybe he tries it. His palate's not going to be terribly refined, probably. Maybe he likes it. Maybe he drinks it and he goes, oh, maybe I'll actually start paying attention to some of these posts I see on, from my friends who like this other guy, this other podcast that I've heard. To me, again, without taste, I don't know what the heck this stuff tastes like, right? To me, it has, at the very least, it has the potential to be that gateway whiskey to bring somebody into this whiskey world that you and I love so much, So that's my point number one as to why I think it is a good thing. Oh, Kirkland brand. Oh yeah, they do this, they do that. Sure, yeah. Let me grab the whiskey. It's cheap. So just from the standpoint of it could potentially turn someone from not terribly being into whiskey to making them then go, oh, you know what? Maybe I'll pay attention because I am tasting those vanilla notes that I'm hearing everybody talk about, et cetera, et cetera. So to me, that's the first sort of pro for this. And I have more, but we'll just start with one.
Well, the one aspect of it is, I did see a post by Fred Minnick on it, and he was not impressed by it. And once again, we haven't tasted it. We're going to taste it.
Right.
The other thing we're going to do.
All of our electronics die before we get to that part.
Yeah, exactly. But also the other part that was really irritating me in the groups once we started this is that I had so many people just assuring me that they were taking 1792 small batch and putting it in the bottle, and it's 1792. Now it's Barton's 1792 distillery liquid. But we are going to tonight put it up against the 1792 small batch. Now, there's been a bunch of people that now that it's out are absolutely saying this isn't 1792 small batch, including Fred Minnick actually was saying that he was not impressed by this. He knows it comes from Barton's, and he's tasted a lot of other stuff. I believe it was a Kroger brand, and that they've actually done distilling, bought and sourced from 1792, and he thought those were much better than what's in the bottle right now, and kind of like maybe Costco got a raw end of the deal. Now that was Fred's opinion of it, not that it's any, not that matters. It's like everybody has an opinion, and if once again, and we both agree with this, if someone actually likes this and wants to drink it, I'm not telling him that that's something that he shouldn't do. But I think what I'm going to try to do here is, one, tell them that you might think 1792 is in that bottle, but it's not. But maybe when we taste it, I never know. I could actually like it, but that's always been the point that I was making. Even if I like it, I'm just not looking for a deal at Costco when I'm buying bourbon. I like the hunting experience. I like the people when I'm hunting. I'm just not looking, you go there, it's going to be there. It's just there. It's not an experience. So that part of a third of the part of what I like about whiskey the marketing and the actual hunting and the place where you buy it and everything. Now, when I went to Costco, I drove all the way, because I live in Ohio. There's no alcohol sold, no hard liquor sold in Costco's in Ohio, because we're a control state. They sell beer and wine. Okay. But I drove all the way to Wisconsin, 7.5 hours back home. First time I've been back in a long time. And I went specifically to Costco in Wisconsin to get this bottle of Kirkland bourbon. So
you're very dedicated. I drove, I think, 8 minutes to get this. So.
You're right there. But at the same time, I was happy because I bought bourbon at Costco, and they had Woodford Reserve Double Oaked for $42.99, $10 cheaper than it is in Ohio. And I call my wife up, and she's like, "Yeah, get that." So
if anybody listening or watching has never been to a Costco liquor store, it's worth it. You're not going to have the same. It's sort of a rotating inventory. Like, you're not going to find the same stuff there every time you go there. I assume that has to do with bulk and overstock. And one of my dogs just jumped up on the sofa next to me, so she'll be joining me. But bulk, overstock, that sort of thing, as to why it rotates. But you're always going to find something. At the very least, you'll find something that for a lower price than you're going to find it in most liquor stores. So I'd say a trip is worth it to anybody, really.
Then on that trip also, here in Ohio, Johnny Walker Blue is $200, and it went up to $238.
Woo!
And but I have been going back to Wisconsin for my bottle because as the Scotchy Bourbon Boys, when we finished our live meetings, everybody's encouraged to have a small pour of Johnny Walker Blue. It's kind of how we were founded, and it's just a really cool experience, especially when you open it right off the bat, what that tastes like. And so we're low on our bottles. So I went back and I was able to pick it up, but not at Costco, but I was able to pick it up at a grocery store chain. And I got that for $194. And I had picked it up as low as the $189. So, it's like prices change, from different places, but not always just at Costco.
Yep. Absolutely. Absolutely.
All right. So so we're at the point where I just think, like, if you're now you were talking about being a bridge bourbon, and my favorite bridge bourbon of all time that I think is it's one aspect is Basil Hayden. I just think
sure
people, that's a great bourbon to start somebody out who's not drinking, because it's got the 80 proof, but at the same time it's very, very silky. It's not hot. There's a lot of nice flavors. It's got a little bit of Jim Beam in, that aspect of it to it. And it's just a really good bridge bourbon, because most people, like, once we get to this point, we feel that it's probably not that strong of a bourbon. There's not the flavor because of our palates drinking so much barrel proof.
Well, and so to that point, just to riff off of Basil Hayden's for a moment, there, after you are, more experienced, as we are, or whatever, people tend to poo-poo it or hate on it or whatever. But I was, for years, very sort of against rye whiskey in general. Like, I just just wasn't my thing, like, I just sort of that dry, whatever. And then I had Basil Hayden's dark rye, which is not a true rye. It has what they call a liquid finish. Which means they're blending a very small amount of, port maybe into that. And it was the first rye, or something like a rye, that I had that made me go, oh, maybe I can approach some of these. And I still, to this day, if somebody offers me a rye, I make a face and I'm like, maybe. But I'm much more open to it, because I've got, I don't even know how many ryes I have right now. We Cast Chasers did a bottling with Reservoir Distillery, and what we wound up blending was a rye, and that blew my mind, because the the group of us that was doing the blending, two of them were me and Bobby, who were kind of had the same feeling about rye. But then we tasted this and we were like, that's it. That's the one, you know? And so Basil Hayden's, it gets a lot of hate, but I'm right there with you. Definitely a sort of a crossover or an entry whiskey or a gateway whiskey. Yeah.
Where I get freaked out is like, okay, so there's a lot, there's people who understand that and they gatewayed a lot. Like Caribbean rye for me is just that rum with that little bit of coconut. That's a really, really good tasting whiskey. But I was the same way. That's one thing we completely agree upon. So I've with bourbon, I've always said there's no bad bourbons. I have not tasted a bourbon where I wanted to spit it out, even if it wasn't something my favorite. I at least enjoy bourbon, so I'm not going to sit. I think the small batch is going to be. I mean, I've had some of the bottom shelf bourbons, and I don't have a problem with bourbon at all. But with rye, MGP rye is horrible to me. I cannot stand it. Willet rye, anybody, Bullet rye, anybody who was sourcing it out of MGP, it's just not my thing. It's horrible to me. I taste some very, very astringent, really, really bad tastes all the time. And some people are, but what got me on it was the Michter's double barrel. It was a toasted barrel proof rye. And also their toasted rye. And I did it on a podcast without ever tasting it, thinking that I was going to pick Michter's bourbon, toasted barrel bourbon. And I ended up liking the rye better. There's like the chocolate in it. So I learned that some of the ryes, and then when you're going around to different distilleries and they dump ryes on you and you're tasting them out, it's just like, it's all over the board as far as there's a lot of good ryes out there. So I agree with you on that.
All right. So since you brought up MGP, I think this is sort of a related conversation to what we're talking about as far as the Kirkland brand. MGP, widely sourced by lots of whiskey brands. I've got at least one of them on the shelf behind me that's sourced. What are you? So one of your major issues with the Kirkland brand is that Kirkland doesn't have its very own, story. They're not making it. And this whole thing, right? What are your thoughts on just sourcing, just brands that all they do is source with no intention of ever making their own stuff?
It depends on the same thing. If they're sourcing and they've got an idea that they're trying to get the liquid to the market, you know what I mean? They're trying to get their own, but they got to wait, and then so they're sourcing in between, which a lot of people that are sourcing out of MGP, for instance, Bullet. I mean, they're trying to get to their own rye, but it's like to get there, they used it, and people loved it. So now I'm sure they're using similar mash bills and whatever. That I have no problem with trying to get to where you're going to get. But if you're just sourcing, I just recently changed my mind on barrel bourbon, barrel craft.
I was going to bring him up. I'm glad you're bringing him up.
I was not a fan. I have not tasted it, but when I was out this time in Wisconsin, it was all over the place. Now there was a seagrass rye that's out, that's really hot, that I was talking to the guy when I was there, a guy that I met, and he's like, you should do it, but I'm not a rye fan. So it's really hard to drop $80 on something you never tasted before. Now I'm willing to taste it, and then, but at first they're just blenders, and I was just like, well, but that's what they're doing. And that's more like towards what Scotch does. That's like what Johnny, they're taking barrels from everywhere and blending and making their own batches. But one thing that's unique is it seems like every batch is good, but it's different. It's like that's one thing I really like about Barrel. So Barrel is they're sort of an independent bottler a little bit, which is a new concept to
America, really.
Right.
Independent bottling. It was being done for years and years and years and years and years and years and years in Scotland.
Yeah.
In fact, it's
And Ireland too. I mean, I think that's they have specific bottlers that just bottled for everybody.
right. So in Scotland, it really independent bottlers are a large part of the reason that we still have distilleries in Scotland, because they would just, they'd come by, whether it was like a friar or a doctor or whatever, and they would bottle up this whiskey from Glenmorangie, from wherever, and they would say, okay, yeah, like this barrel tastes really good. Let me bottle this, and I'm Friar Craig, and here's Friar Craig's bottling of Glenmorangie. It was this barrel, and it's really good, and that's what really sort of sustained the whiskey industry out there, and a good part of the reason that we even have single malts out of Scotland today, which are your whiskeys that are coming from one distillery, right?
Right.
So because before that, the vast majority of your distilleries in Scotland were being made for blending,
right?
And which is good, which is great. There's a lot of amazing blends. You'll hear Scotch fans sort of hate on your whiskey blends, your Scotch blends, but there's nothing wrong with it. So Kirkland, what they've been doing for years and years at this point, with bourbons, with whiskeys, with scotches, with wines, a lot of wines, is they've been sort of walking that line between sourcing and independent bottling. And, it's sort of an independent bottle because it's its own label, but it's also kind of sourcing because you don't really know where it's coming from. This is the first time I've seen from them where they say, hey, it's by Barton 1792 Master Distillers, and they're actually being very transparent with it, as opposed to just Kirkland bourbon. So to me, it's a neat thing. And I'm also a very, very avid proponent, a huge fan of independent bottling, and getting some, because I'm telling you right now, some people have said that this is just 1792 small batch poured in a different bottle. It's not. I know it's not.
I know it's not too, but to tell someone that, they absolutely know it. So we're going to basically put that test tonight.
So the coolest thing about this to me is that it's unique. You're not going to find it anywhere else. You're not going to find it in is it crap? I don't know. We haven't tried it yet. I hope we do this whole thing and you love it, and I'm like, this is the worst thing I've ever tasted. That's sort of what I'm hoping for.
I might, like I said, all along, it still comes down to, like, I have 300 freaking bottles. I've got craft distilleries. I've got exactly what we were just talking about, people blending and whatnot, but there's still an aspect of craftsmanship that was put into this. And this basically sings to me that this is basically Barton's had a bunch of extra barrels that they weren't going to, and because this is a small batch that's distributed across the country at Costco, which is a bulk buying food center, and because they buy in bulk and they sell in bulk, that they can offer a lower price, which is then everybody's like, well, they don't have to do any marketing. This is why it's cheaper. But basically the whole damn thing is what they're doing here is a marketing campaign.
Well, also, neither you nor I know who's actually involved in picking these barrels and seeing what barrels they are in the vatting process. We don't know where it's being vatted. We don't know any of this. It could be somebody that is, or a handful of people that are extremely passionate about it, that they just got their big gig. Oh my God, I'm going to be the master blender for Kirkland, And it could be, if I'm in the whiskey industry, if I'm in the
itself, it's just like, that's not what I want under my resume. Hey, I was the blender because nobody else, we blended for Kirkland. And it's like, you're going to be like, I just Aaron Harris is now at Watershed, and he came from Lux Row, and he came from Barton's, and he's got like, that's what's on his resume. But it's like if he was at Barton, and they had, he's like, yeah, I was responsible for Kirkland. That was 1899. I don't know if that's a good thing on your resume. You know what I mean?
I think it absolutely is, because you're just learning.
Something.
You're learning the industry. You're learning the industry, right?
Yeah, I agree.
It's like you want to be a movie star. First, you start working on the sets, right? You start working on the sets. You start meeting the people there. Hey, I know this kid. He was the key grip on such and such. It's to me, it's no different. So.
Well,
I don't hate you, whoever's blending this.
You're talking about Hollywood, but my relationship would be the porn industry. So that's what he's getting into there. It's just kind of the porn industry.
Well, okay. So, all I'm gonna say, and my wife just mouthed this over to me, and she's 100% right. Harrison Ford was a carpenter on the set of Star Wars, and that's how he got his start.
Yeah.
So you never know where you're going to find talent. Are we going to drink stuff and then argue more?
Yes. Pour the 1792 and the Kirkland into. I'm pouring into a Scotchy Bourbon Boy Glencairn. Are you pouring into a Cask Chaser Glencairn?
No, because my Cask Chasers ones are not clean at the moment. But I will tell you which ones I am pouring into. The first, I will pour the 1792 small batch into a Water of Life Glencairn. And that's the Water of Life film. Fantastic documentary, primarily focusing on Jim McEwen, who recently retired. Basically a whiskey god.
Which you guys did a podcast on, which I listened to. That was
yeah. We were lucky enough to be actually Jim's final podcast recording prior to him retiring. Huge honor.
I recommend that everybody that they listen to that podcast. That was a great podcast. You guys pretty much knew what you were doing at the time, and he's so humble.
I couldn't. He was just so kind and so thankful to us. And I'm like, dude, we don't make whiskey, and we've been doing this stuff for just a couple years. So anyway, that's the Water of Life, and they're the folks that actually introduced us to Jim McEwen. So thanks to Greg from the Water of Life film for that. And then the Kirkland brand, I'm going to pour into a glass that I recently got from Bardstown Bourbon Company, who are now on the Kentucky Trail, I believe.
Yes, the Bardstown Bourbon Company. Yes.
So Bardstown Bourbon Company. Neither of these are a sponsor of Cask Chasers, by the way. I just happen to like these people.
Nally and Nick Smith. They're fantastic distillers. And then I know Greg Schneider, who's been making chicken cock there. So just a fantastic place.
So Bardstown Bourbon Company, fantastic. We were at an event that they had in Washington, D.C. a couple weeks ago, and we were able to get a couple of these. So Bardstown Bourbon Company, highly recommend. Also, the Bardstown Bourbon Company sourcing until they have a full run of their own stuff, and they're actually going to be helping other distilleries in the industry as well.
That fusion blend that which their stuff keeps getting older, so that blend keeps getting better. And that their Fusion 4, I think it was, and that just was out, and that is some fantastic. I mean, I did 4 versus 3, and there was like night and day.
So I've got a Fusion 3 behind me, and I actually have a Fusion 5 in my kitchen.
Okay.
And they're all really good, and you're right, they keep getting better. All right, which one of these are we going to, well, let's look at them first, shall we?
So we're looking at, let's go by proof. Well, yeah, when you look at them, definitely you could tell right away 1792 is a darker, it's got more of an amber color, a little bit more towards like a caramel, whereas for the Kirkland for me is a little bit more towards the yellow golden, and it still has but it's missing that little bit of red. It's more, and it's not gold like but it's like what would you say, a lager, a beer, that beer. It's not.
Yeah, I'd say slightly darker than a lager.
Right.
but right around there, and they're very close. I will
Yeah,
say
they're
they
close.
are very close.
It's just that 1792 is picking up a little bit more red.
Mm-hmm.
All right, and then what was it?
Our ABVs are pretty close though.
Yep. Well, I think 1792 was, I want to say 93.
93.7.
And then the Kirkland is 92. So if anybody wants to say, you know, oh, that's just 17, well, that right there tells you it's not 17.
At the very least, it's a different proof.
Right. There's no doubt.
So
we should do what we're doing with the lower proof. Now in the glass, let's see. Well, it's sticks pretty good with fairly nice, it's not thin legs, and it really hangs on. It clings to the glass.
Absolutely.
All right, here comes. I've been waiting for this for so long.
Yeah, let's do it.
I knew that at one point I had gotten myself so deep that I was going to have to buy a bottle and actually, you know, try and back up a little bit what I was saying.
But at $18, how couldn't you?
No, I wasn't, you know, when I went, I'm just like, you know, I'm sitting there and I go in and they got it. I see the small batch. I'm kind of looking for the single barrel and the barrel strength. That wasn't there. But then I'm going around and I'm like, oh, $18.99. And then I look and I pick up the bottle and I'm like, fuck, and it's a liter.
Yeah, they're huge.
You know, an extra 250 milliliters added in. Now, pleasant nose. I'm getting it. There's no astringent part of it. What I gotta figure out what I'm getting. It's like
I'm getting something almost like a almost green, like a grassy, clovery kind of. I mean, it's
actually a clover flower.
Sure. Okay. Yeah.
I mean, there's a candy in there.
Okay.
There's a familiar candy that I'm getting. You know, one. I don't think it's definitely not a sweet tart, but I'm trying to think what that is.
I was thinking a more fruity candy, and not usually with a bourbon. It's like a caramel type thing, like a Werther's Original or something.
Right, but this is more Starburst. No, it's you know what it is? It's what's the one? Oh my God! It's the one with the commercial where the face is all where you catch the candy. What is it? What are those?
Skittles?
Yeah, there's a Skittle flavor in there on me.
Okay, yeah.
Like a cross between almost like a lemon or a lot.
I was gonna say lime.
Yeah, lime Skittle.
And now we're planting things in each other's brains too. So
no, but it was like lemon lime Skittle. It's like
sure. No, I can see
I mean,
that. Also, people, this also smells like a bourbon as well.
Yeah, it's got some caramel, a little bit of corn, but it's not. What would you say? I mean, this does not have an age statement, right?
I don't believe it does.
Right. All right. So
I guess evidence.
Let's see what the 1792 is doing comparatively. This ought to be good. In the glass, it's very 1792 is a little thicker. It's holding on a little bit longer.
Yeah, it's coming. It's the 1792 small batch is coming down more in like kind of those stripes that you see.
Yep.
Where it like kind of tugs on it almost like fingers when it's coming down.
Right, and then it's a little bit slower to come down. Where the other one, once it started going, it was going a little quicker.
Yeah.
All right.
Again, very similar between the two of them.
That ain't fair. Now this one, it's
I'm going to say, to me, the small batch is not worse and not necessarily better, but to me, it's less interesting. It's a little more one note on the nose.
Right.
Note.
This is a little bit of the 17.9, but the noses are similar. There's a similarity between the two. So
I'm not getting that brightness cutting through on this one though, on the 17.
Right, and I'm definitely not getting the Skittle aspect of it. I'm getting more of a richer.
This one to me is more what I expect from a bourbon, more of that sort of like butterscotch sort of thing going on. Honey almost a little bit on this one.
Yeah, but I don't get a lime or a lime Skittle, but I'm still getting a hint of citrus.
Okay. I'm not getting it. That's not to say that it's not there. We have different noses.
Of course.
Mine's over here. Still very pleasant. Both of them very pleasant in different ways.
All right, so let's do the tasting. This is the key.
All right.
So they got really close on the nose.
Yep. All right.
Either one can be. Now, I've had very old Bartons, and I like the nose on very old Bartons, but I don't like the taste. So let's see what happens when we.
All right. So what I usually do, I do like one quick hit and ignore it, just to shock my palate.
I've already done that with Minor Case Rye this evening.
It's good stuff. I will say on my quick hit that I ignore, super mellow. Super mellow.
So, the big chief, Michael James Hyatt, has been giving me a ton of shit about this. And one of the things on there that I was listening to their podcast on it, and it seemed they really had an aspect of the podcast. They did it. I was kind of mentioned, not directly, but indirectly by some people. I was referred to as some people think that this, my opinion, which was fine. It actually was humorous when he said.
I've called you way worse than some people. So.
Anyways, yes. So that was, they were covering it, but they were talking about this being a really good party bourbon for mixers. And it's like, it's kind of like they said it so many times. And I really think that, there are party bourbons and mixers, but at the point of when you're selling a small batch, you know what I mean? Mm-hmm. Yes, the price point is a price point of a party mixer, but you're putting small batch on it, which you're saying you are above Jim Beam and you're above, you're at the small batch level, not the small batch price level, but you're at that small batch level. And so that was the kind of thing that I was getting at with him as far as that went forward. But
and small batch is so it's not a legally defined term either.
Right. I think
anybody can make anything and call it small batch. Right. A craft distiller's flagship whiskey is going to be way smaller than a 1792 small batch.
Right.
Right.
No doubt. Because to get it everywhere in the United States, it's pretty rough.
That's a big batch, right? Like,
yeah.
Like to me, that's a big batch.
And they compared it to Old Tub, and I would have to say there was an aspect of the taste that it's not as flavorful as Old Tub, but there's a taste profile that's very similar.
So to me, that comes down to sort of the mellowness and the subtlety of it, which I'm going to agree with you that Old Tub I feel has more going on, than this one does. I don't think this is bad. It's certainly not the worst bourbon I've ever tasted. It's certainly not the best bourbon I've ever tasted.
Well, for $18.99, even as a liter, it shouldn't be the worst bourbon because it's not a $9.99 bottle. And I've had some good $9.99 bottles. I mean, I wasn't expecting it to be horrible, but at the same time, you know, it's like I knew that this is bourbon, and I would say that if I had to, I'm telling you, this is a little bit above average. There is a part of the finish that I don't like, because I like to have a sweeter finish or a unique finish, and this one's leaving a little bit of a astringent oaky finish for me. Just a little bit, not a lot. It's not like I'm pissed, but it's not a great flavor. You know what I mean?
So, it's so funny that you say that, because in finishes, especially with bourbon, to me, a sweeter finish is boring to me. So that, you know, that's just going to be one more thing that's just not that I dislike a sweet. In fact, I would say a sweet finish in a Scotch is pretty desirable to me,
right?
Because they're so few and far between. And there's a couple of them that just have this like honey note that just sort of sings for like a minute and a half after you've already finished drinking it, that I love. But again, when you're talking about a Scotch whiskey versus a bourbon whiskey, and I think that's what I like about this, is it's something further from the norm that I'm used to in bourbons. But again, good. I would call this a good bourbon. Yeah. I would not be like, if somebody
it's
just
not a great bourbon, and it's not, but it is. They were saying that it was very drinkable, and I would say this is drinkable. I mean, like I knew that when it was coming from 1792. Now this is better than Very Old Barton's to me.
Sure.
Very Old Barton's is a little bit more harsh. This is like, but this reminds me of one. There's a have you ever had Gentleman Jack?
Yes, I have. Yeah.
That's horrible to me. That's one of the most
Yeah.
horrible whiskeys on the planet that I've ever tasted. And it's just me. Once again, I tell everybody, you could love Gentleman Jack. I'm not going to sit there and say, hey, I hate it. You do, but it was just that. And this has a little bit of that mellow aspect that I didn't like about it, but nowhere near the disgusting aspect that, to me, that Gentleman Jack has.
Gotcha.
Whereas, you know, Jack Daniels, it's fine with me, and the single barrel, but that Gentleman Jack is something that I can't. I had one sip and I didn't even give it to anybody. I just gave it away to a guy that likes Jack Daniels.
For our listeners, this episode of the Scotchy Bourbon Boys podcast is brought to you by Gentleman Jack.
Exactly. It's like I'm honest.
So I do find this drinkable personally, but because of the price point, I would also not hesitate to use it in a cocktail. You know, because why not? I think this would be a good bourbon to, if you are an aspiring mixologist, if you will. I think this would be a fantastic bourbon to sort of get your ingredients right, to sort of build your cocktails, to say, okay, how can I tweak this cocktail to be the best cocktail it can be without, you know, burning a hole in your wallet, which right. Honestly, I used, back when it was findable and affordable, Buffalo Trace used to be my tweaking my cocktails bourbon.
It's still findable and affordable here in Ohio.
Well, okay.
$4.99, and you can get it like 20 times a year.
Right.
But my favorite cocktail bourbon is what you can get anywhere, anytime, at any place, is Old Forester 100. We blind tasted that, and I put that in second place. It beat an anniversary, a birthday. It beat 1920, 1910. It one anniversary of the three that came out this year was number one for me. But that Old Forester 100 is some fantastic stuff, and that's in the realm of this, and I would pick that in front of that. And and once again, I agree. This would be okay. This would be a good bourbon to mix with, but it's Kirkland, small batch, and I can find Old Forester 100, or I can find the backstory of, and I know it's Brown-Forman, and I know what it is, but I can find what I want to find in overall, and it's not missing it. And it's not like when I buy Old Forester, it's not like it's being sold as this discount. it's being sold as Old Forester 100. It's not like you think you're getting a deal. It's a good bourbon, but it's being priced at what they think it should sell at, where this, the whole marketing scheme of Kirkland is you're getting a deal because we're Costco and we're driving that price down, and we've got this, we're putting this in there. And that's the part for me, and we know this and we've been arguing it, that's the part that why I wouldn't want to do this. I want to be at a party and I'm like, look, I'm serving you all Old Forester. And the people who don't know, they know Old Forester is a brand that people look, it's not Old Forester 1920 or 10, but it's Old Forester 100. Where if I'm serving this, I'm telling them, that's just my opinion, I'm telling them that I went out and got a discount bourbon and this is what you guys are getting. Just my opinion.
But I also think that people that don't know don't care. You know?
Oh, you are 100%. I mean, all you got to know is Jack Daniel's by far is the largest selling bourbon, Tennessee whiskey, whatever you want in the world, and it's not even close. I mean, we are talking about second place is Jim Beam, but it's 2.7 million cases behind, and third place only makes 2.7 million cases.
Right, exactly. Yeah.
I mean,
and that's the thing. So you're not the target market, for Kirkland. I'm not the target market for Kirkland.
Right. We are
either. We are not. I happen to like it, which is good because I can get a liter of it for under $20, and that's fantastic.
Yeah.
But if I was at your house, if I was at anybody's house, and they said, hey, I have a bourbon, do you want some? I say, sure. They're not really a whiskey person or whatever. And they bring this out. I go, oh, cool. And then I can, this is now a discussion because I could, now I can reference this whole thing that you and I are doing tonight, but I can say, hey, what do you know about this? And they go, not much. It was $18 at Costco. And if they have been drinking it and they've been liking it, again, it serves as one of those sort of gateway things, which I already said.
So you know, if you're coming to my house, what you're going to get is an old Fitzgerald 16-year, or you're going to get my good stuff.
No, I know.
You will not see my Kirkland. Even if you said, can I get some? Sure, I'd let you have some. But I really don't think, based off of these bottles I have laying around, you're going to want to even wait.
I'm gonna come to your house and I'm gonna request it out of spite. No, this is all I'm drinking.
You are invited too anytime you get to around Canton, Ohio, man. If you're going through Ohio, we'll set up a meeting to have you here. We could do a couple cross-platform.
Absolutely, yeah, we'll have some fun. Okay, so that was the Kirkland one.
Mm-hmm.
Overall, I like it. I think I probably like it a little more than you do.
Actually, I think I like it as much. When I was listening to the podcast with, God, now I'm running
the Bourbon Road.
What?
Bourbon Road.
When I was listening to Bourbon Road, I think I like it more than I thought I was going to like it. So yes, there's an aspect. I've tasted a lot worse bourbons for more money. Yeah.
Oh yeah. And so I think we can both agree. Good bourbon, not mind-blowing bourbon. It has some interesting things to it, like that, whatever that citrus lemon lime note is on the nose is interesting, pleasant nose. So yeah, I mean, from a how it tastes standpoint, I think you and I are pretty close to each other.
Yeah, there's no doubt. I thought the nose was probably above average. The taste was, like you said, it's good, but it's average. But let's do the 1792 real quick and see. Right. Let's just put that part to rest.
So this reminds me of a 1792 small batch.
Exactly. But see, there's an aspect that whiskey drinkers will like Okay. You know the two different types of whiskey drinkers. There's the whiskey drinkers that like those full-bodied whiskeys, and they like it to smack them. You know what I mean? And if it's not smacking them, they're like, this is shit. This is low. And
neither of these are for those people.
Right, but this one has a little bit more of the smack. You know what I mean? There's a little bit of spice that was lacking in the small batch, and there's a little bit more. I think there's a little bit more oak.
Sure,
but it's
definitely more of a woody thing going on.
Right, but it's not as mellow as that mellowing aspect. There's no mellowing aspect to it.
And I do,
and a little cinnamon.
Yeah, I like it is exactly what you expect a classic American bourbon to be.
Right.
You know, it's not going to take you on a ride. It's not going to take you on a journey, but it hits all the right notes. It's got a little bit of punch to it, so you still feel it in your chest, after you swallow it.
Right.
And it hangs around, which I like.
Yeah,
and
nice
long. I forgot. So it's been probably 2 years.
Yeah.
Since I've had any 1792 small batch, and I enjoy it. I'm really digging that finish.
It represents the foolproof well. One of the things. So when we first started, we got a case of foolproof through Super Nash out of South Carolina, but it was a store pick. And me being, what would you say, a bourbon rookie at the time, we weren't even podcasting yet.
Sure.
And he sent up the case. We got it. We compensated it, sold it at the meeting, or not sold it, but distributed at the meeting.
Yeah.
Everybody had paid him, and he basically sent that up, and it was hot. And I was just pretty much starting out. I had really kind of started getting into it, but it was hot. That foolproof was hot, and I didn't realize that was a single barrel. So when I went last November or September, we took a tour of Parton's, and I picked up the actual foolproof that won. Jim Murray's whiskey of the year.
Yeah. And
the difference was amazing that, a lot of times those single barrels can be better. Like I've had a ton of Buffalo Trace single barrels that, Buffalo Trace is not a single barrel. It comes out as a blend. It's a barrel blend, not a whiskey blend, but that barrel blend. And that profile is really good. Like you said, it's great for doing all the mixers and all that kind of stuff. But you get some of those single barrel picks on Buffalo Trace, and they're just unbelievable.
Well, and I mean, honestly, that's one thing I get excited about is barrel picks. Independent, the three things that I get most excited about right now are barrel picks, because they're all going to be different. Independent bottlings, again, because they're all going to be different. You'll get, and I didn't understand independent bottlings when I first saw them, because most of them that you're going to find are going to be Scotch whiskey. And I referenced Glenmorangie earlier when I said it, because that was one of the very first independent bottlings I saw. I don't remember which independent bottler it was. It might have been a Gordon MacPhail. And I looked at it, and it said Glenmorangie on it, but it was definitely not a Glenmorangie bottle. And I was just so confused by it. And then I started looking into independent bottlers. I'm like, oh, cool. This is going to be a Glenmorangie that I will never, ever taste anywhere else ever.
Again,
Glenmorangie's not putting it out. And reasonable prices, too. You might get something that's, like a 15, 25 year, that's, literally a single barrel, which, I mean, the 25 year of a Scotch, good Lord, you're going to wind up paying $400, $500, $600, maybe more for it. And you're going to get these things for under $200,
Right. And then knowing that you're only going to get 70 at a 25 years, 60, 70 bottles. That's it.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it's like, yeah, there's that, and then that single barrel pick. We've even got now in Ohio state picks.
I've heard of those. Yeah.
Where the people, some of the state picks, the Oceans state pick was one of the best bourbons I've ever. I wish I would have bought 2 or 3 bottles. I picked up one, and it tasted like French toast, straight up French toast with maple syrup.
Yeah.
I never even came close to that, but in the whole bottle throughout the time, because it's something you covet, because, French toast is like my favorite breakfast. Okay.
Okay. Yeah. Gotcha.
So I'm sitting there going French toast on the first one. Then the second time, like 2 months later, still French toast, and you're just kind of going as you went. Even that last little sip that I just was draining the bottle, just drinking straight from get every little drop tasted like French toast. And it's just like, you get those so rare things that it's just amazing.
So so there are things that I like about the small batch better, and there are things that I like about the Kirkland better.
Okay.
I think the small batch absolutely wins on the finish. Like, it absolutely blows the other one away on the finish. It lingers longer. I'm a big fan of that Kentucky hug, that you get there in your chest and it just sits with you and you can curl up in a ball and go to sleep. I'm a big fan of that.
The Kirkland did give you a nice hug, though, for having that first one. It was okay.
I feel like this is just lasting a little longer. It's a little bit warmer. I'm not gonna say that's because of the proof, because we're off by less than 1%. But this wins it on the finish for me.
Yep.
To me, this is the 1792 small batch is a better representation of a bourbon. Okay.
Yep.
Like, to me, that's a bourbon. That's what a bourbon is.
That's a small batch bourbon, and it's reasonably priced. It's $36 to $39. What did you pay for yours today? When you
less than 30, I think.
Really?
So, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. We see it here around $36.
Yeah, and that sounds like what I think wherever I ducked into, they might have just had like trouble selling it or whatever, and it was lower, or they hadn't gotten newer ones in. But I think it was under 30 where I got it. But 30 and anywhere between 20, 27 and 38 is where you'll find it roughly.
Right. And the reason why I knew small batch, it's obviously what they put in here wasn't small batch. It's not 1792. It's not that. Now, is there an aspect of maybe that's barrels that they eventually use for small batch, or that didn't? It's got a flavor profile that's very similar. There's a little bit more oak, a little bit sweeter on the 1792, but the small batch, I just put a little bit more in right after I finished off my 1792.
Yeah, so did I.
No doubt it's similar. It comes from Barton's. I mean, it could very well be the same mash bill.
Sure, yeah, and I think I will say, because you and I are sitting here, dissecting them and like comparing them side by side, we're definitely picking out the differences. But if you just gave me this Kirkland brand and told me, oh, hey, this is 1792, I would drink it and I would believe it was 1792, especially not having drunk it for 10 years,
Got see, that's the part that pisses me off. It's kind of like, yes, but that's not what Barton's is doing. There's no way they're going to take the stuff. The difference between the two. So here's the actual question.
Sure.
So if you had to pick, and they were the last 2 bourbons that you were going to buy, and you had to pay $29.99 or $18.99 for the liter, what are you picking? I mean, for me, it's simple. The difference is enough where I would drop the money on small batch, because I have so much bourbon. It's kind of like, I don't need a Kirkland's in my collection. I'm glad I tasted it. I'm glad I know it. But it's like, I'm not, for what I'm looking for out of bourbon, either podcasting or whatever.
Yeah.
This isn't so. I would have to say that I don't even know what I'm going to do with the bottle going forward. I would definitely, like you said, I would rather on a night, because I really enjoy Old Tub, which is same price point, but you get 750 milliliters opposed to
Right.
a liter. But if I have to pick between Old Tub and this, I'm picking Old Tub because there's an aspect that's just really has a nice flavor to that. This one is very neutral, but I would agree with you on your point that if I've got a bunch of people who haven't had bourbon before, this would be a good bridge bourbon, but would you include it in we're bourbon supposedly podcasters, and you do flights for people, and people come to you for, so they're coming to you for what is good bourbon. Are you putting this in your flight is the question.
So I might, as a comparison, like strictly as a, hey, this is also from this distillery, or what, like if I was doing something like that, just to sort of show whatever, or if I'm doing, so when we're about to start getting back into monthly tastings, the whole way Cast Chasers started was like 7 of us got together at Bobby's house and started talking about whiskey, and we just every month after that, up until COVID, literally every month except for one November when we were preparing for a big event in December, we just got together, a whole bunch of us, and drank whiskey and talked about it. But what we started doing with that was we started doing themed tastings. So the theme of this month is blends. The theme of this month is barrel proof. The theme of this month is scotches from Islay, so smoky, peaty scotches, that sort of thing. So as a tool to show differences and similarities in something else, I think so. Yes, I would do that. But, and this is going to piss you off, the way you first started phrasing this is last bourbon on earth. Okay. So if somebody said to me, hey, Aaron, you're on a deserted island and for some reason, there is a whiskey drop off every week, and you can either have this or this, not talking price point or anything. Okay. I would pick the Kirkland.
Why? Because you get another 250 milliliter.
Oh no, that's funny though. That is funny. Let's assume the bottles are the same, because that's hilarious. So that's a bonus. But no, and here's why. I do not. I 100% think that the 1792 is a better representation of a bourbon, 100%. But the small batch is more interesting to me to drink, like throughout the process of while I'm drinking it, because it's got that weird citrus Skittles thing. It's got, I would enjoy more sitting there and sort of going over in my head, what is that note? What is that note? Because you and I both did that at the beginning. What is this? It kind of smells like, to me.
But you're on a deserted island and you're getting a drop, okay? That's the most fucked up scenario ever. You're getting a drop. So someone knows where you are. They're just torturing.
Well, that's true too. Like, I also want to find this person.
So you'd rather be tortured by Kirkland bourbon than 1792. But at the same time, it just blows my mind. For me, I would take the 1792
because it's 1792.
No, not because it's 1792. Because the taste aspect is richer, fuller, and I know. I mean, okay. Here's my scenario.
Yeah. Go ahead.
You get to fill out a little check mark. So 10 weeks I'd take 1792, and then one of the weeks I'd take the Kirkland.
Okay.
And then I'd probably have it rationed after the 10 weeks of 1792, and then get the Kirkland because I get a little bit more, and it's and it's not that bad. You know what I mean? It's kind of like, and then I'd probably try and mix it with some ocean water.
Okay. Yeah. Sure.
Get a lime.
Get a little brininess in it. Yeah. Yeah.
Because, you know, I'm sick of after 10 weeks of neat bourbon, and I just want to mix it with the coconuts and the limes. And I wouldn't want to I'd just take that last bottle of 1792, put it off the side, and start mixing with the Kirkland.
See, at the end of the day, and I mean, another thing I know you and I 100% agree on is there's no accounting for taste, you know? Like, you're going to like what you like. You're going to prefer 100%. What you prefer. I'm going to prefer what I prefer. I think in general, if somebody just flat out said to me, do you want Scotch or bourbon? I'd go Scotch. And if somebody just flat out said to you, hey, do you want Scotch or bourbon? You'd probably say bourbon.
I would say bourbon. But like, for instance, if someone said to me, rye or bourbon, I'm going to say bourbon. But I've worked really hard to find the Scotch. If someone said to me 90% of the bourbons or Johnny Walker Blue, I'm going to pick Johnny Walker Blue.
Well, yeah. I meant just flat out taking that out.
But I've worked hard in Scotch, and I've worked hard in Irish whiskey, and I've worked hard in rye to find what I like.
Right.
But in bourbon, I didn't have to work at all.
Right, exactly. Because you're just gonna...
But you do realize there's a bottle of Evan Williams or Ezra Brooks in a 1.75 liter, $29.99 for those 1.7 that I would drink before this in seconds. You know what I mean? Those are fantastic.
Mm-hmm. Well, and I think on that we can agree. But I literally between these two whiskeys, I actually prefer drinking the Kirkland one. Like, I prefer the experience of drinking that, and that again, it's because to me, I'll say all day, the 1792 small batch, delicious bourbon, fantastic representation of a bourbon, but to me, it's a bourbon with nothing terribly special to offer.
Right.
Not that the Kirkland's has anything special to offer. It's just more unique.
It's got something else that. So as a bourbon, if you had to pick it as a bourbon of what bourbon should be, you're picking 1792.
Oh, all day long. But
as a podcaster tasting many bourbons and many scotches and many different whiskeys, you like the fact that this offers something that's different than what
I prefer the drinking experience of this to the 1792 small batch. But again, there's no accounting for taste, you know. But at the end of the day, I think both of us would say, either one of these two, or say like a Wilderness Trail, we'd be like, I think I'd prefer Wilderness Trail, anything that Wilderness Trail making.
Yeah, I would agree. The Wilderness Trail is some delicious.
So like
now that they're getting into their 6 years.
Yeah. Right. Yeah. It's starting to get exciting. But like but literally, if you're just showing me these two, which obviously that. We don't live in this world with these whiskey drops and all these other things where we're on a desert island.
Right.
But if gun to my head, somebody told me I had to drink one or the other one of these for the rest of my life, I would pick the Kirkland, just because I enjoy the experience of drinking that more than I enjoy the experience of the 1792.
But what's wrong with that is that I would pick the 1792 because they're going to make it for the rest of your life, and this is going to be over in 2 years. So you'd be drinking.
I guess I better just get a lot of it all up.
Yeah. You'd have to buy a lifetime supply, but I don't even know if that's available.
Sure.
But you could afford it.
Right. Yeah, sure.
You would be able to afford it. I mean, quite frankly, it's like you get 2 liters opposed to 750 because if you want it for the same amount of money. Now, me, once again, this has always been my point. If I'm sitting out on my back porch by my fireplace, I'm picking 1792 all day long, because there's a whole aspect of the Barton's distillery and all the quality and everything that goes through it. Now, this still covers, and they're still exposing it as the Barton's, the Barton's distillery, but they're not they're it just seems like they're getting a batch of stuff that was distilled for just this part of it, and they don't put quite the time and effort to get it to market, because 100% 1792 stays on the shelf. It doesn't stay on the shelf. It's gone. It's periods of time of disappearing in Ohio, periods of all over the country. They can't keep up with it. So why would they sell something they can sell for $36, $30 a bottle at $18.99 to Costco? And we all know that they just wouldn't do that.
Well, that's any independent bottle. Like that's a whole different conversation, though, because that's if we spin into independent bottlers, you could make the same argument. Okay, there's this fantastic barrel of 20-year whatever sitting in such and such distillery. Okay, you have an independent bottler that comes along and they go, hey, I want to buy that barrel. It's an amazing barrel. It tastes head and shoulders above anything else that you're putting out. And I think that my market, that, the people that trust me as an independent bottler will really like this. I really like it. I want to buy this barrel from you. And I want to say it's, such and such from this distillery. But it's, being produced and bottled by who have cask chasers, let's say.
Right.
Okay.
But
so people have said, well, if that's an amazing barrel, why don't they use it? Why don't they make the money from that? Because that's not their market. Their market is making what they make. Their market is.
You're right. You're right. So those few barrels that you're talking about, a regular distillery doesn't know what to do with them, because they can't put them in their general making, because it's so unique. And these unique bottles, so like you go to a craft distiller and they know exactly what the fuck to do with those bottles. They basically start making single barrels and selling them at their gift shop, and they sell like hotcakes, because they're so different and they're so unique, and they're so not the flavor profile of what they're trying to get, but they're so delicious. So what you're doing as far as that independent, through cask chasers, is being able to solve their problem, because they're far and few. It's not like they get 50 of them and they can make because this is Glenmorangie or this is Jim Beam. They can't put something out that's so limited.
Right, yeah, and they'll do a couple drops here and there just to get rid of it. Ultimately, yeah, I see what you're saying. But so to me, it's I see where you're going, and you're saying that this is almost similar, but almost the opposite at the same time. Your feeling is that this is it's a bunch of barrels that they didn't know what to do with, but they're maybe not as great barrels, is sort of your thinking.
No, they're so great that they would change their flavor profile just alone of dropping it in. They're just, and there's not enough.
No. I'm sorry. I'm talking about the stuff that Kirkland is getting.
Right. They're the stuff that after they're done with 1792, they didn't make the cut, so they got to do something with them, and they're probably too good for Barton's, very old Barton's, so they got to know so they basically contract distill those barrels out to these different places, and then it comes down to, are they really, who gets what? You know what I mean? Like they contract distill, they got that giant still there, and they contract distill for a lot of people.
Mm-hmm. And at the end of the day, neither you nor I knows who. I don't think that's far-fetched. I absolutely don't think that's far-fetched. I would like to know, what the story is, where, like, how these actually came about. Are there, like, different batches, and they're like, hey, who wants this batch? And you go try, 4 or 5 different batches that they have sitting there, and Kirkland goes, this one's the best out of those. It's how much? Okay, yeah, we'll take it for that much. That may very well be kind of how it went, but I just don't.
Yeah, I agree. It's like, so we kind of, We pretty much hashed this out. I mean, it's not.
Yeah. And I think we're where we expected to be, to be honest.
Right. We're both in the like. I knew this would be halfway decent bourbon. I mean, there's no doubt. It's just that, like I said, at the end of the day, I'm on the back porch. I'm relaxing. There's a lot of different bourbons that I would pick over relaxing with picking this one. But at the same time, there's so many people. It's not 1792, but it's still something that's good. So if they like it and they want to think that they got a good deal for their party, and they want to use it for mixers or they want to drink it, it's a good bourbon for that. But that's not. I mean, what is wrong with wanting the whole package?
Nothing.
That's
well, and I want to say that too. That I think your way of thinking is wacky, and you think my way of thinking is wacky. But there's nothing, and that's what I love about whiskey. That's what I think you and I both love about whiskey. Is there's something for everybody, right? If there's somebody, let's say somebody like us that has had different whiskeys over and over again, gets this and they're like, nope, this is it. This is the best thing I've ever tasted. I'm only buying this from now on. It's probably not going to happen. But by the same token, if it does, God love them. God love you. That's your favorite whiskey. Go ahead.
Jim Beam, Jack Daniels, all those sell way more than any small batch, than anything out there. They blow it all away. They don't even come close. And it's by far, and you get all these people in the whiskey groups just ripping the crap out of it, that it's not this or that. But there's something to be said that the general population of whiskey drinkers like consistency.
100%. And those of us that are aficionados, or those of us that are, these deep enthusiasts of whiskey, whatever that may be, whether that's bourbon, Scotch, Irish whiskey, American single malt, whatever. We're not their target market, but we're the ones that are going to talk about it the most,
right?
Because and that's the thing. Like, it's going to get more publicity from people like us talking about it, and other people going, well, I mean, Aaron and Tiny, they talked about it. They said it wasn't bad. Let me go try it. Well, yeah, they're right. It ain't bad. It's kind of good, but it ain't great. And then, it'll just sell more, and it'll just do exactly what it's supposed to do. Right. And that's the beauty of it.
I'm in it totally for, and I didn't realize this, is for that moment when you're at a small craft distiller. I was at Watershed, and you get this single barrel strength, and you drink it, and all of a sudden this explosion on mid palate happens that you've never had before. Or when I got to taste from Greg Schneider, he brought along, before they bottled their 15-year barrel strength. Okay, he let us sample it, and I looked at it, and I took it, and I looked at the bottle, and I never tasted anything like that before. I couldn't believe it. And then I was at first time I had Little Book 4. I was doing a podcast with Sandy No, and she had it out, and I tasted it. It's like I thought it was rigged. I went out and bought a bottle because I thought it was rigged. There's just no way bourbon, or that was a blend, could taste that good. And that's what you're in it for. You're looking for those unique tasting experience where, holy crap, how can bourbon do that? And the same thing with scotches. There's certain things that happen and you're just like, whoa. And it's like it's whiskey. And when you first started, I was a Jack Daniels, Jim Beam drinker that just bypassed my whole frickin' palate. My dad loved Jim Beam, and I mean, not Jim, he was a Jack Daniels drinker. So I drank a ton when I was a kid, but it was always, let's get past the palate. Let's see if we can't taste it. You know what I mean? Kind of thing. And then, the single barrels came out in the 90s, and I had no idea when I bought a Jack Daniels single barrel what it was. So that's what you're in it for. You're in it for those fantastic drinking experiences, or tasting experience, not so much drinking. And then you also have to keep your wits about you by drinking the minimal amount of it. Otherwise, it can bite you in the ass, right?
And I think at the end of the day, you and I are obviously not in this to make a great fortune. We'd be idiots if this is what we were doing.
No, I'm looking at it like doing this in my retirement for just I've tasted a shit ton of really good food.
Right.
People will and they've given us a lot of whiskey, but at the same time, it's not like it's a great after I'm done working, I'm going to go, just straight full time into it.
Sure. And so at the end of the day, if you and I and, anyone else is getting people talking about whiskey, getting people tasting whiskey, getting people to open up their mind, open up their palates, and, just really dive in, and even to just consider it. If you taste a bunch of different whiskeys and you don't like them, okay, great. But even just to get somebody to try it. And one of my favorite things about the tastings that we would do, the in-person tastings pre-COVID that we would do, that we're starting to start back up again, is when someone who was, an avid whiskey drinker or very much into it would bring their spouse, and, oh, I don't like whiskey, I don't want to try any of it. And you know what? They'd find one that they really liked. And that's what it's about. It's more about the experience. It's more about what you're doing with the people that you're with. Yeah, I like a good story, but you know what? Half to 3/4 of the stories in the whiskey industry are made up, or at least embellished,
Right.
So,
no. And that,
and I know
aware
that.
of it, but
Right.
And then there's the story, and then what's really cool, what I love, is that I'm getting to experience whiskey with the people who are making this whiskey.
Right.
Greg Schneider bringing chicken cock whiskey. You're talking about Duke Ellington loving chicken cock whiskey. You're talking about that history, or you're talking, Fred and Sandy know. It's just kind of like to be able to sit down and talk to Freddie and do a barrel pick with Freddie, and Freddie know. And it's just like all those experiences is what I love about this. And that's what I've always loved. You know what I mean? As we're doing that. So, it's kind of like I probably, the master distiller at Barton's, and I know I can get in there. I haven't been in there yet, but that would be just a great conversation piece on how they're doing the Kirkland and how they're selling off the what they're selling off and what the difference is. I think it would be a great podcast.
Absolutely. And at the end of the day, so people that are just listening aren't going to be able to see it, but I've got a handful of whiskeys behind me, and I specifically pick them because they are either sourced, have a kind of made up story, or are relatively new, So I've got the Larceny right here. That happens to be the barrel proof. I've got the Blackened, which is the Metallica one. But you know what? That's Dave Pickerel, and you can't argue with Dave Pickerel. But it's the Metallica Blackened whiskey, which is a little kitschy. A little, okay, we aged it while playing Metallica. Does that really do anything to it? But it's Dave Pickerel, and I'm not gonna argue with him.
I've seen the video. It's
right.
It's a cool video. Check it out on YouTube.
Yeah, absolutely. Bardstown, which again, they're just getting started up. They've got stuff that's just a handful of years old, but that's got other stuff blended into it. They're very young. Angel's Envy, entirely sourced.
Which one?
The bourbon.
The port cast finished?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. I'm sorry. Yeah, the port cast finished. After that is Old Line Spirits, which is a new brand in Baltimore. They're making fantastic stuff. Entirely American single malts. It's outrageously good. And then Penelope Bourbon, which is brand spanking new, which is just two guys that liked bourbon, and they just decided to source. It's all sourced. It's all completely sourced. They don't have any sort of desire to actually start making it, but they were just guys that liked bourbon and went, I think we can make some bourbon, and I think we can find out some good stuff, and I think we can get some really good stuff, and it's outstanding.
I mean, that's no different than Johnny Walker in his grocery store. What is it, 300 years ago?
Yeah, whatever it was.
Yeah, there's an aspect of the sourcing that I'm coming more on board for, and all those as you were going through. And one of the things that I've been seeing is that those craft distillers are, as they've been coming up, and now that they're starting to get their age stuff to market, plus maybe do some blends or whatever, it's really kind of exciting because they're producing some damn good whiskey that doesn't taste like Kentucky whiskey.
Right.
That Indiana profile, or there's a bunch of places in Ohio, and it's really cool because I've just started touching the Ohio distilleries, and it's just like they're so excited to have the podcast come in and do a podcast, but the stuff that they're producing. I just was in Wisconsin, where I'm originally from, and I was at J. Henry and Sons. Talked to Liz Henry, who's the mother of all the J. Henrys, and her husband, and they're just basically corn. They grow corn for seed, so it's a whole different process. But they're distilling, and but they don't distill, but they age. So they contract distill, and then they age it and bottle it, and it's I wasn't excited about their small batch as much as I was about their single barrels and their barrel strengths.
And then you said something that I really like, which in general, I tend to agree with the statement, as their whiskeys are getting older, the stuff that they're releasing in their, like flagships in their core lines are getting better, because you're going to get more of the flavor out of that oak, right? And that's where all of your flavor is coming from. One thing I will say is this is the exception to the rule. This is not the rule. But going back to Old Line Spirits out of Baltimore, we've become pretty good friends with those guys over there, and we've walked through their warehouse. We've sampled a number of different barrels. There is a barrel in there that Bobby and I cannot stop talking about, and it was less than 2 years old.
Yeah,
it haunts me, this barrel, that it was that. It's the exception to the rule.
But just if they're not bottling that, just imagine what that's going to be at 4. But great distillers and agers understand that completely. Some of it becomes ready, and then that's their whole. Now, if you're at a place like what you were just talking about, a craft distiller, they have the ability to be able to pull that barrel and basically sell it. Whereas when you're talking about the bigger distillers, they're going to let that age a little bit further and see what happens. So there's a lot of difference between the craft distiller, what they're doing, and what the.
I already told them on that specific barrel. I said if you're going to do anything with it, let me know first where it's going and what's happening with it, because I want a taste of whatever that's going to be.
Yeah, there's so much going on with so much good bourbon. But the one thing that's the greatest thing, and I've said it to all the distillers, even the craft distillers, the big distillers, they can't make enough. They just keep selling every single bottle that comes to market. And it's really a good thing. That's what makes the industry so together. Everybody's, just even just like, it's so great. With Kentucky Bourbon Festival, I look forward to the different podcasts that are coming there. I mean, it's almost like we should do a whiskey podcast convention of our own, where everybody just comes who's a whiskey podcast and have a convention for it, because the podcasters all seem to, interact with each other, and really it's the same thing. It's kind of like, well, who listens to you? Who listens to us? Some people listen to both, but it's kind of like we're a little bit more bourbon. You guys are a little bit more diverse in everything that you're doing.
Sure.
Where I want to be more diverse, but if I start doing Scotch podcasts, my actual listenership and viewership goes way down. They're looking for the content.
But you get classier listeners. So what? No, I'm just kidding.
No, there's no doubt. I mean, I was into Scotch before I was into bourbon. So I'm not a fan of peat, never have been, but I'm a fan of some good. I love burnt things. I love barbecue. I love something. I want my toast burnt. So Scotch just makes sense to me.
Sure.
But like I said, some of the Scotch podcasts, it's just kind of like you're just going, "Hey, come on, guys, listen."
Right. Well, I'm glad, and honestly, I've said this before. I think your podcasters, your people that are in any sort of media, in and around the whiskey industry, the whole whiskey industry, like the worldwide whiskey industry. I think we are really how accepting we are of each other, how we don't really compete with each other. We help each other out. I think we're really a reflection of the industry that we are talking about, because that's how they all are too. I mean, and I've you talk to head distillers, you talk to whoever, and if one distillery needs something and another distillery has that thing to spare, they're letting them have it. They're letting them borrow it, And I think that just goes all the way around. You see that in the end, and you have your black sheep here and there that aren't like that, but by and large, I think the way you and I interact and the other podcasters, the other folks in media, is a great reflection of the industry as a whole as well.
I agree with that 100%. I know that we disagree a little bit on this. I think it's
more fun than anything else the way we
think I've come more onto your side than you came onto my side. But at the same time,
because my side's more right than yours. So no, I'm kidding.
Yes. And you know what? I'm not going to, that was the whole aspect of it. What is wrong with me if I want it all? That's just it.
Nothing.
It's kind of like, that's the thing that this delivers on 2/3. It doesn't have it all. There's a third aspect. They don't market, and they're basically not distilling, and they're sourcing it, and they're buying it, and they're basically selling it as a discount. And that's the part where, that's not part of it for me. I just, that's the part I still can't get over. It's like, but at the same time, I knew that it wasn't going to be a bad whiskey, because it came out of Barton's. I mean, that's a Kentucky distillery that knows what the fuck they're doing.
Exactly.
So they're not just dumping, if they're going to sit there and put their rickhouse and their name on it, there's no way they're going to give them a bunch of shit. That's one thing for 100%, because if this was horrible, that would hurt Barton's, right?
Absolutely.
But at the same time, this is some really good discount Barton's bourbon.
There you go.
So everybody, all right. Thank you, Aaron, for your time.
Thanks so much for having me.
Oh, give a podcast,
a spiel, little. All right.
You guys have done a great job.
Yeah. So thanks again for having me on, Jeb. I really do appreciate it. To your listeners that maybe haven't heard or seen me before, hi, I'm Aaron. You've gotten to learn a little bit about me. I do have a podcast with two other folks, Bobby Bird, who is my dearest friend, and our director, whose name is Katie, and she's fantastic. She keeps us on track. She kind of steers the ship when Bobby and I start rambling. So you obviously you can listen to our podcast, which is the Cask Chasers podcast. It's far easier to spell than it is to say. So Cask, CASK, Chasers, spelled like Chasers. You can follow us on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter at Cask Chasers. You can also join our Facebook group. We do have a Facebook group that is Cask Chasers. And don't forget to check out our website, which is caskchasers.org. We've got show notes there, Cask Chasers swag, more. And that's it. Thanks so much again, Tiny, for having me on. This was really fun. It was a nice way to unwind after a day of work.
It was wonderful to have you on. Great to finally talk to you directly. I mean,
we do a lot of texting and stuff back and forth. Yeah.
Yes, but not the face-to-face, which Zoom has allowed us to do. Look for us. We are the Scotchy Bourbon Boys, www.scotchybourbonboys.com. Check out our Patreon. It's the top right-hand corner. Click that. Lots of swag through Patreon. And then also check us out on Twitter. And then for sure, we are at Scotchy the on Twitter. And check us out on Facebook, our Facebook group. Same as Cast Chasers, but the Scotchy Bourbon Boys. And then also YouTube 100%. We are starting to push for YouTube. This will go on to YouTube in the next day or two. So check us out there. And we greatly appreciate all of our listeners. And remember, good bourbon equals good friends and good times. And everybody, remember, go out there and live dangerously. All right, so let's Jim Morris take us out. Jim Morrison. Morris.
What's your name? Go away to the next whiskey bar. Oh, don't ask why. Oh, don't ask why. Show me the way to the next whiskey bar. Oh, don't ask why. Oh, don't ask why. For if we don't find the next whiskey bar, tell you we must die. Tell ya we must die. Tell ya, I tell ya, I tell ya we must die.
All right, we are offline.